Something in the way she moves attracts me like no other lover. Something in the way she woos me. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Pace for Your Case. You might be thinking, why is this immigration attorney playing Something by George Harrison of the Beatles? What does that have to do with immigration law? Well, it has a lot to do with immigration law. First of all, the Beatles, the British invasion, so to speak, was one of the most famous migration stories in the United States. But also, we have the benefit now to have access to the FOIA, what stands for Freedom of Information Act, of some of the Beatles' alien files or immigration files. In particular, George Harrison's, which is a very interesting bunch of documents. And I wanted to take this time as an immigration attorney to review that with you right now in this part 1 of part 3 segment. Let's go ahead and get started. Thank you.
All right, let's get started on this long and windy road of documents. George Harrison's INS FOIA. So you'll see right here the cover letter for his, it's a 90-page document. It's more than 90 pages, but that's all we had access to in this public that was accessible on the public. And you'll see that in the page numbers, that it skips page numbers in the bottom as we go through it. But you'll start off with a cover sheet. And these are things that you can request. If you are an immigrant here, permanent resident, had a visa, you can request this for yourself. If you have a deceased family member and you have their death certificate, you can request it. There's different ways to do it. You can request it by mail. Stale mail is less slow. In the old days, we used to do it. We used to get back a disc like this, and we would review them. And you can also request them electronically. It takes not as much time. It takes several months now to get back. But I hope that this will be something interesting to you as I walk you through the law, immigration law, point out some things. What I do. I've reviewed thousands and thousands of FOIAs from both the A files. We call them A files, the alien files with the United States Citizen Immigration Services, which contains these old INS too, Immigration Nationality Service, or the old way you say immigration. Now, of course, it's under, instead of the State Department or the Department of Justice, now it's under Department of Homeland Security. But there's other different requests too you can do to CBP, Customs Border Patrol, ICE, FBI, but this one happens to be his immigration file. So this is a change of status request where Mr. George Harrison of the Beatles entered on his B1 tourist visa and wanted to change status in the country to an H1 temporary worker, which he was granted until March 5th, 1972, for the purpose of a TV show in connection with promotion of a charity drive for the relief of children living in Bangladesh. Singer, musician, artist. Here is the second page of that FOIA with information. And by the way, you're going to see a lot of times, you'll see these boxes right here where we don't see the information. That is going to be what's an exemption or an exception to information. The B6, you'll see a lot. This see here, the B6. And the B6 exemption is for unwarranted invasions of privacy to individuals or government employees, and that's going to be like sometimes names, birth dates, phone numbers, social security numbers, those type of things. He talks about a conviction. We're going to talk about this. He was George Harrison was convicted May 7th, 1967, of possession of a quantity of cannabis resin, contrary to a Dangerous Drug Act 1965, and it's fine. So he had a criminal conviction, which you'll see all throughout these documents, makes it more complicated for him. So even though he's a Beatle, and you think, oh, he'd get preferential treatment, he still had to go through the immigration process like any other person and seek waivers. In particular, a waiver called a 212D3 waiver. Go right here. So here you go. I like this. So here's the statute that allows, we still do 212D3 waivers today for non-immigrant visas for certain charges of inadmissibility. And the charge of inadmissibility right here is stated 212A2A subpart I22, which is the equivalent of what we have today, a crime involving moral turpitude for a drug issue or drug possession. And his, like you said before, was that that possession of cannabis. Today, that could be a permanent bar for certain things, unless you seek a 212D3 waiver and for a non-immigrant visa. So, and we'd love to see these stamps approved. Right here, I like this. So this is a cover letter for another request, and you'll see we had him doing a B1, change status to an H1. And then also this is a petition for an O1 extraordinary individual type visa. These are your musicians. These are your stars. These are people who just, they're at the top of their profession and what they do. Obviously he's a Beatles, so he's a prime candidate for an O1, which he requested. And here's the cover letter, the O1 from no, this is a letter to him for him to come and play in a tribute concert to Bob Dylan in the United States. Oh, I would love to have been at that tribute. I love both the Beatles and Bob Dylan. I'm nerding out. I'm an immigration attorney. I love to play guitar. I love the Beatles, and I'm actually a history major. I love history. You see lots of history, lots of politics, and a lot of stuff coming through in this FOIA. And in this 3-part review, you'll see a lot of that. All right, so I like this letter. This letter right here is from Sol Mark's attorney, and one of his attorneys thanking INS for letting him be admitted in the United States without a visa. He forgot his visa back in England, and they let him on a plane, and they let him in even though he forgot his visa. And they're saying, "Thank you so much for coming in." So this is really interesting. And later on in one of the parts, you'll see a consequence to the air carrier for doing this, which is interesting. So even though George Harrison did not have his visa, he still got his ticket to ride, pun intended, to the United States. And he's shown some preferential treatment as a Beatle. And that was the thing that blew me away about this. You see preferential treatment for him because he's a Beatle, but later on you're going to see they were actually hammering him pretty hard based on his conviction, and also some politics involved in here. And we'll get to that later on in one of the other segments too. Let's see here. This is an extension of status, another extension of status. You see a lot of documents that are very similar. You got to keep applying for the 212D3. I'm going to jump up to page 21. Get up there real quick. I like this. This is itinerary. So this is probably his itinerary for some concert dates. So you see he started October 1st, 1974 in Los Angeles, California, working his way up the west coast, the west, Tempe, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, Texas, ends up New York at the end of that tour. Itineraries are still important immigration, especially for O and P visas. You got to do that itinerary. You see those a lot today. Now, let's see here. I like this. It talks about, every time, you come to the United States, customs always asks, what's your purpose of your trip or your travel? And you'll see that on the forms here. So you get a little idea, a little window into the purposes of George Harrison's travel to the United States. You'll see a lot of documents too that you can't read very well. I'm going to skip those. Here is a G28 notice of appearance of an attorney. We still do that today. Still have a G28 form that looks a lot different. It's not a 1-page form. It's now a 4-page form. And then I love this one. So this is one of his application purpose to engage in legal consultation with attorneys in Los Angeles and Mr. John Lennon. You're going to see a lot of John Lennon coming up soon in this. You'll see a lot of interaction with John Lennon. We'll talk about that. And then that's it for now. So join me in my second part. This is the first 30 pages of the 90 pages of George Harrison, and we're going to fly through in part 2, the next about 30 pages, and then the other 30 pages, and it gets really interesting. Thank you for watching Pace for Your Case, and please subscribe for more immigration content, and thank you for supporting.